Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Luckiest Peach podcast. I'm your host, Rachel, the Lucky Peach. Today, we begin my official reviews of the films I was so privileged to see at Houston Cinema Arts Festival 2022, which I have attended for the second year in a row. I will have a final review of the overall experience of HCAF 22 up in the future, but today we are focused primarily on the films that I saw. And today we are recording in probably the gayest location in my house, also known as my bedroom closet because it has the best acoustics in the entire house. I really don't have much to preface these reviews with other than I had like an absolutely wonderful time this year at HCAF. It was 5,000% like a better experience than last year and was just so incredibly seamless. And I'm so grateful to Houston Cinema Arts Society for allowing me to cover the festival for a second year in a row. So with that being said, I'm just going to jump right into it with the opening night film, which was Elegance Bratton's The Inspection. Inspired by Bratton's real-life experiences, the film follows Ellis French, who is a young, gay black man and has been rejected by his mother. And with little options for his future, he decides to join the Marines, doing whatever it takes to succeed in a system that would cast him aside. But even as he battles deep-seated prejudice and the grueling routines of basic training, he finds unexpected camaraderie, strength, and support in this new community, giving him a hard-earned sense of belonging that will shape his identity and forever change his life. The film was produced and distributed by A24, has an official release date of November 18th, 2022, and a runtime of 95 minutes. Bratton's feature film debut is a autobiographical story of a gay black man and the challenges and pain of homophobia in the Marine Corps. It not only explores the closed-minded military recruits who at times are abusive, but it also explores the heartbreak of being queer and doing everything in your power to make your parents proud, only to be let down by their inability to accept you for who you are. The film is gorgeously shot, and performances from Jeremy Pope and Gabrielle Union are award-worthy. For some background information, Bratton, at age 16, was kicked out of home for being gay and spent 10 years being homeless before joining the Marines. He served as a combat camera production specialist in Hawaii. At first, I was nervous going into this film blind, as I always do, because I found that the less information I know about a film, the easier it is for me to form my opinions and not go into the film with skewed expectations. But I was nervous because all I knew about this film was that it involved the military, and that is a topic I don't particularly like. However, I was quickly enamored by the story. As a queer person, the feeling of not being fully accepted by your family is all too familiar to me. And not just for me, but for a large number of queer people, and I would argue the majority of queer people. The treatment of queer people in the military is something we've all heard about, but something we don't really get to see explored in film. Bratton directing this film allows for the very, very personal approach to storytelling, whereas a cishet director being hired to direct a film written about this may not have been able to express these events so faithfully and heartfeltfully. I don't even know if that's a word. It is a very, very strong feature film debut from Elegance Bratton, and The Inspection is a stellar film that foreshadows a successful directing career for Bratton. I give this film 3.5 stars. So, following The Inspection, the next film that I was able to watch is Laura Poitras's All the Beauty and the Bloodshed. It is distributed by Neon and has a runtime of 113 minutes, and the official release date is November 23rd, 2022. Following the life and career of photographer and artist Nan Golden, All the Beauty and the Bloodshed examines Golden's photography through LGBTQ subcultures, the AIDS crisis, and the opioid epidemic. Following her own personal struggle with opioid addiction, Golden, who rose from the New York no wave underground to become one of the great photographers of the late 20th century, put herself at the forefront of the battle against the Sacklers, both as an activist at art institutions around the world that had accepted millions from the family and as an advocate for the destigmatization of drug addiction. So the film is divided into 7 chapters, with each beginning with excerpts from Golden's slideshows before transitioning into footage of her recent protests with pain, meaning prescription addiction intervention now. The viewer is allowed to witness the beauty and suffering, or I guess all the beauty and the bloodshed, that Golden experienced throughout her life, beginning with her older sister's suicide in 1965. We then get to explore her experience within the queer community, working with such queer icons as Greer Langton and Cookie Muller. We then are subject to viewing the pain and suffering of the AIDS crisis of the 1980s and 90s, one that most of us will never truly understand, as she lost nearly all of her loved ones to an illness that the nation would condemn them for contracting. Moving into the 21st century, Golden tells of the opioid addiction she gained after being prescribed Oxycontin for wrist pain. This leads us into the meat of the documentary. Golden goes on to portray the creation of pain, their many protests against the Sackler family and Purdue Pharma, and the success of many major museums, including the Met, the Louvre, and the Guggenheim, removing the Sackler name from their galleries and refusing their donations. One of the things I think this film suffers from is its length. The desire to include every detail of Nan's life led to a few redundant portions of the film. And, I do understand the desire to include every single detail, but with the protests against the Sacklers being the primary focus of the film, some stories and anecdotes felt unnecessary and dragged the film out and didn't really seem to have a way to tie in to, the meat and potatoes of the documentary. Overall, I do think this is a wonderful asset for Neon and that they will definitely have a second consecutive Best Documentary Feature Academy Award in the near future. I give All the Beauty and the Bloodshed 4.5 stars. Following All the Beauty and the Bloodshed is Ali Abbasi's Holy Spider. What is seemingly one of the most talked about films of the year, Holy Spider, follows a female journalist who travels to the Iranian holy city of Mashhad to investigate a serial killer who believes he is doing the work of God, cleansing the streets of sinners by murdering sex workers. As the body count mounts and Rahimi draws closer to exposing his crimes, the opportunity for justice grows harder to attain as the spider killer is embraced by many as a hero. Based on the horrific true story of serial killer Saeed Haneh, acclaimed writer-director Ali Abbasi unveils a gripping crime thriller and a daring indictment of a society in which rough justice is routinely a fact of life. The film is distributed in the US by Utopia, has a runtime of 117 minutes, and does not currently have a United States or North American release date. For some backstory, Abbasi was a student in Tehran when the 2000 to 2001 murders took place and was baffled by the conservative response that heralded Haneh as a hero and by how long it took for police to capture him. He began writing versions of the film shortly after seeing Haneh interviewed in Mazar Bahari's 2002 documentary, And Along Came a Spider. Initial drafts followed the events more faithfully, but Abbasi eventually deviated from them and invented the character of a female journalist, as he felt the film should focus not only on the serial killer, but on misogyny itself. He is quoted as saying, "My intention was not to make a serial killer movie. I wanted to make a movie about a serial killer society. It is about the deep-rooted misogyny within Iranian society, which is not specifically religious or political, but cultural. Instead of making another movie about different ways a man can kill and mutilate women, we want to underline the complexity of the issue and the stakes on different sides, especially on behalf of the victims." I was absolutely, incredibly excited to see this film just based on all the buzz I was hearing about it, as well as the fact that, it's being distributed by Utopia, which, although, it is owned by a member of the Coppola-Schwartzman family, it is an incredibly independent company that is still building. It's still building up off the ground. So this is a huge step, not just for Utopia, but for literally everyone involved, especially with the nature of the film and the plot of the film, and how it very, very clearly parallels what is happening in Iran today, which, the release of it in 2022 was not intentional. They were initially going to film in, I believe, 2019, maybe even 2018, but it got pushed back due to government interference in the location that they wanted to film at in Jordan. They also tried to shoot in Iran and in Turkey. None of those went well, but eventually, after many pushbacks, they were able to film in 2021 in Jordan, and completed filming in like a remarkable 35 days, which when you see this film, there's no fucking way. Like, it's insane. It's insane that they were able to film this in 35 days. I think this film is incredibly important. You know, having a film, having a film's production be, pushed back and postponed is, I can only imagine how awful it fucking is. Like, it's gotta suck. You're trying to make this movie and it's just not happening, and you end up waiting like 3-4 years just to be able to film it, after spending all those years trying to film it and just not being able to. In my personal opinion, that was like fate speaking in a way, because I personally feel like the film releasing in 2022 with the current events in Iran is incredibly, like, currently, in May of this year, the Cinema Organization of Iran's Ministry of Culture and Islamic Guidance issue a statement condemning the Cannes Film Festival for awarding the film with Best Actress, calling it an insulting and politically motivated move. The statement that they made compared the film to the Satanic Verses and said that it has insulted the beliefs of millions of Muslims and the huge Shiite population of the world. And in June of this year, Minister of Culture and Islamic Guidance Mohammed Mehdi Ismaili said Iran formally protested to the French government through the foreign ministry. He also said, if persons from inside Iran are involved with the film Holy Spider, they will surely receive punishment from the Cinema Organization of Iran. Like, it's so frustrating. It's so frustrating, the events that have unfolded this year alone in Iran. And not only that, but the fact that the timing of this film being released while these events are occurring, it wasn't intentional, but like, it's still so impactful and meaningful, and it's like the perfect timing. It's it's so incredibly emotionally draining and frustrating to see that they're condemning this film and tried to stop it, from getting as much acclaim as it has. And it's quite literally, like, it's historical fiction. It's, in a way, it's a biopic. It's a period piece. It's depicting events that actually occurred. Like, the fact that they are condemning, like, I don't even know what it is they're not condemning the fact that they're portraying the serial killer. They're condemning the fact that this film is clearly criticizing the misogyny and and um, incompetence of the police in 2001, when they just, were like, it took them too goddamn long to arrest him. And Ali Abbasi portrays these events faithfully, but with adding in the, fictitious element of the female journalist, as a motif for, feminism and standing up against that kind of misogyny. Everything about this film portrays Saeed Hanei's case and the community's support of him killing sex workers so faithfully. And the fact that they're just so openly doubling down, it's about the oppression of women and how the people in this community were just like, no, he's innocent. It's okay for him to murder all these women brutally and dump their bodies. And it's the same institution that put these women in a place where they felt that doing sex work was their only way to survive. Like, it's just the clear disconnect of not realizing that, like, misogyny leads to these problems, and these are the same people that pay prostitutes. Like, it's ridiculous, and it's painful, and I'm glad this film is releasing this year, at the same time that these events are occurring, because it's aiding in opening our eyes to just the awful, awful treatment that women are suffering. It is the official Danish entry to the Academy Awards. So with that, I give Holy Spider 5 stars. The next film I was able to see was Dina Amer's You Resemble Me, produced by Vice Studios, and also has production credits from Spike Lee, Spike Jonze, Riz Ahmed, and Alma Har. After the November 2015 Paris bombings, Asna Aid Boulassen was labeled Europe's first female suicide bomber. Journalists swarmed around her story, trying to extract details about the mysterious young woman who lived on the outskirts of Paris. Director Dina Amer pieces together Asna's story from over 300 hours of interviews, from a little girl protecting her younger sister from an abusive home to a young woman who finds herself trying her best to survive on the streets. The film shows what happens when society fails to protect a child, and how discrimination, poverty, and abuse facing young people can allow radicalization to plant roots and grow, with devastating impact on the wider community. So Dina Amer worked as a reporter for Vice News and reported on the 2015 Saint Denis raid, in which it was later found out that the police report that Asna Aid Boulassen was a suicide bomber was actually false. Boulassen's family was contacted by multiple journalists, but they chose to speak with Amer, who over the course of several years, conducting 360 hours of interviews with her family and friends, wrote the screenplay and made it as accurate as possible. She wanted the film not to excuse Boulassen's choice, but to explore radicalization and how she got there and prevent others from falling into the same traps. Amer walked away from the deal with a major studio in order to maintain her vision, as financiers preferred for the film to be a documentary. The film has a runtime of 90 minutes and was released on November 4th, 2022. You Resemble Me is a stunning portrait of a woman who is struggling with her identity to the point of being radicalized, which is exactly what Asna Aid Boulassen was struggling with her entire life, not just at the time of her death. It's following a woman who doesn't know who she is, because all she's ever known is running away and just trying to find herself to stay alive, and that leads her into the hands of something dangerous. The film begins showing, her and her siblings and how close her and her sister were. It shows the abuse that her and her siblings experienced at the hand of their mother, and how social services in France, intervened and separated her and her siblings, with them all in different foster families. From the foster situation, it follows her running away and growing up, kind of sleeping from couch to couch, basically being homeless a lot, going through different jobs. And then from there it shows, how in an attempt to discover herself and reconnect with a family member, she ends up being radicalized. I think the most stunning aspect of this film is the use of deepfakes. If you had told me before I saw this film that it used deepfakes, I would have been hesitant. But the use of them is in art is just incredible. So the way that the FX team uses the deepfakes is they took the 3 images that were of different women that the French media was saying was all Asna Boulassen. They were 3 different women. None of them were her. They took the faces of those women and used those as deepfakes. And in moments whenever it's clear that Asna is very, very much struggling with her identity and doesn't really know where she is or who she is. It You can see it's kind of one of those, if you blink and you're not paying attention, you'll miss it. But her face entirely changes it, and there's even a couple scenes where there's an entirely different actress portraying her because it's showing how she's trying to fit into a mold that doesn't suit her. It's one of those things that if you don't pick up on that, it might affect your opinion of the film. But when you realize what's going on and that they are altering her appearance in that way in those moments, it's so impactful. It's so incredible. Like, to me, that explains the struggle of trying to figure out who you are perfectly. And obviously I'm not in that position. My struggle with my identity was, not of this caliber, and I am at a point in my life where I do know who I am for the most part. But that is kind of what it feels like. And I can only imagine what it feels like when you don't know who you are for the entirety of your life. I think this film's just phenomenal. I can't wait for more people to see this film. That's how much I loved it. And I gave it 4.5 stars. So the next film is Sarah Polley's Women Talking, which is based on the 2018 novel of the same name by So the next film is Sarah Polley's Women Talking, which is based on the 2018 novel of the same name by Miriam Toes. Women Talking is produced by Orion Pictures and Plan B Entertainment and will be distributed in the U.S. by United Artists Releasing. It officially releases on December 23rd, 2022, and has a runtime of 104 minutes. Reeling from multiple counts of sexual abuse newly uncovered within their Mennonite colony, a group of women gather in a hayloft to discuss how to respond. While the men are away, the women narrow their options down to 3. Do nothing, stay and fight, or leave. Some fear that any act of defiance will jeopardize their entry into heaven, while others believe that they cannot survive without husbands and sons. Some are willing to take any measures to escape the terror of their domestic lives and insist that the truth is stronger than the rules. The film does have a packed cast with Rooney Mara, Claire Foy, Jessie Buckley, Judith Ivey, Ben Whishaw, Frances McDormand, and Sheila McCarthy. After the film, there was a Q&A with Judith Ivey and Sheila McCarthy. So the story is based on true events that occurred in Bolivia. I will come back to that point in a minute. In 2010, 8 women from an isolated Mennonite colony grapple with reconciling their reality with their faith after it is revealed that men from their community drugged and raped the community's women at night for years. It is very loosely based on the events that occurred in Bolivia. And when I say loosely, I mean primarily because the film itself, is set in America, in the United States. So I think you can see the issue I have with that. Bolivia is very much not in the United States. Obviously, it's not the first time a film and a novel both are adapted from events that occurred in a Latin American country and turned into a United States American story. That's the wild thing, is that's not even my primary gripe with this movie. It is fucked up. It is fucked up that in an effort to make this feminist film, we are still whitewashing the fuck out of a film, which only just makes it very, very clear that this film serves the girl boss narrative. That's the best way I can put it. Like, I already have an issue with the fact that Frances McDormand is everywhere. She's a great actress, but like, is it in her writer or something that if she decides to produce a movie, she has to get top billing? Like, that's what I've noticed, and it honestly irks me. I think she's a great actress, but that it grinds my gears, because she produced this film and she gets top billing on the posters, and she has 5 minutes of screen time. And her role in the film, her sole role in the film, is the one old woman who stays. and is like, we can't leave. That's it. That's it. It's just a grumpy old woman. We could have gotten that from any actress. And the fact that she gets top billing for that is pathetic. I honestly, Frances McDormand, I do respect you. I think you're a great actor. It's ridiculous to do that, to fund a girl boss, a whitewashed girl boss movie. You know, for lack of a better way of putting it, I think that's dumb. And that's the kind of thing that, like, makes me angry enough to the point to actually call it dumb and, like, use harsher words. Yeah, no. My biggest gripes also with this film are with the execution. I also just have an issue with it being presented as this super independent movie. When United Artists isn't an independent company, it's not technically considered independent anymore. And Orion Pictures is a subsidiary of MGM. So it's MGM's way of releasing movies and calling them independent, kind of like Sony Pictures Classics. It's hard for me to put it into words. That's how much it bothered me, like the editing. So I did learn in the Q&A that this film was primarily filmed with single coverage, single shot coverage, which is, you know, close-ups on each actor. Um, and at any given point in the film, there are like 10 people in a scene. So we're talking about a film that is primarily told through single close-up coverage of 10 people in a hayloft, back and forth talking for 2 hours. It's that. It's like if you've ever seen Bohemian Rhapsody, or if you've seen that clip from Bohemian Rhapsody where they're meeting with the producers for the first time and it's just cutting back and forth. It's that. It's nauseating how many cuts there are in this film, and the way that Sarah Polley did the coverage without with hardly any mid shots, two shots, hardly any wide shots, primarily single shots, and just cutting back and forth. This film 100% suffers from it, and that's where I'm just like, where the fuck is all this critical acclaim coming from? Is it coming from the fact that it's a girl boss movie? Because the execution and the editing is not it. It is not good. There's no chemistry between the actors, and their cadence in the way that they're saying like different sentences within one conversation makes it feel like they're having two conversations. Like it feels like they recorded two different conversations and then spliced them together. It literally is just like, well, women are talking. Women are talking. What are they talking about? I don't know, because they're all saying 5 different things at once. And the director is trying to say that this is a cohesive conversation, but it definitely doesn't seem like it. So for those of you that are not involved in film production, when you do single coverage like that, you know, you have the actor you're doing the coverage of sitting in their spot. And then if they're sitting really closely to another actor, you'll have them there, or even a stand-in there, not even the actual actor. And then you'll have the rest of the cast standing off camera, like not even in positions or anything, just standing off camera reading their lines to the actor who's having their coverage done. And it's useful, obviously, but when you make a film almost entirely of that kind of coverage of that many people, you're losing the energy and the emotion of the conversation and the chemistry between the actors when you're only shooting one person's lines at a time. And also, I can't imagine how much that prolonged the filming process of having to just do that. And at one point in the Q&A, Judith Ivey was saying they did up to 100 takes. I can't imagine. Like, I'm not even surprised that it looked like there was no chemistry and that the cuts were so choppy and jarring, because these people were probably exhausted. They had no energy to give left to it. And also the fact that they're not playing out the whole scene. They're just doing one person's lines at a time. You're losing the natural chemistry of a conversation. And for a movie that is solely focused on conversations, I don't understand what the thought process was of being like, let's do 90% close-up shots of each actor and then splice them together, because the cuts are so jarring, and some of the actors, like, you can't even tell what their character's standpoint is supposed to be because they flip-flop in a way that doesn't make sense. I had a hard, like, this film, the plot of this film is actually really, really fucking simple, but because of how poorly the execution of it is, I had a hard time following it. The other issue I have with it is, like, I get it, the film is about women, but only seeing two men the entire movie makes it hard to understand the whole concept of what's happening. It makes it hard to understand, like, not even from an object permanent standpoint, just from a context standpoint. It's hard to understand, like, these men that they're trying to get away from if we don't at least hear them, because one of the two men we see, which is the only one with lines, is Ben Wishaw, who is their supporting man, because the in Mennonite colonies, women don't know how to read or write, so they find one that's going to support their cause and have him take their meeting notes. And the only other man you technically see doesn't have lines, I don't believe. I think he says one word maybe, and you only see him from a distance. You never see them, like, working, and we all know enough about Mennonite colonies to know that they farm a lot. They live off the land. And the fact that we don't see any of that. All we see is one single husband walking with horses at one point, and at another point walking into his house. That's it. That's all we see. So it's, like, hard to understand what the fuck is going on. Like, where are they? Days that pass within this movie. Where are they that they're not doing the work? None of it makes any fucking sense that there's no that there are no men there, because it makes it seem like it's just a colony run by women, when the fact of the movie is that these women are oppressed and they're trying to escape that. It's confusing, and I'm trying so hard not to spoil the part of the movie that made me laugh the hardest, because without saying too much, they decide to do something with the entire group of women an hour after sunrise. To my knowledge, and to most people's knowledge, we were taught that, when you're a farmer and you live off the land, you're usually up at the crack of dawn to begin your work for the day. So the fact that the women are deciding to do this thing an hour after sunrise, away from the men, like, in secret, but they're out in the open fields. And logic would tell you, hey, they're gonna fucking see you, because an hour after sunrise, they're still gonna be, like, tending to the animals and farming. Like, what? That's not very sneaky at all. They use that. They conveniently, there are no men in sight throughout the entirety of this movie. So conveniently, because they didn't hire men to play these men that they are running from, they conveniently can be like, yeah, we'll leave an hour after, we'll do this an hour after sunrise. The men won't be here because we didn't hire any. We didn't hire any male actors. So we can just say that the men won't be here an hour after sunrise, even though logically, yes, they fucking would be there. Yeah, no, I clearly was not a fan of this movie. I wanted to be. Before going into it, I wanted to be, because, before each movie, there's somebody from Houston Cinema Arts Society that introduces the film. When we got that little introduction, that's the first bit of information I got about the movie, and I was like, okay, this seems cool. I'm looking forward to this. And then I came out hating it because it was just so poorly executed that I just couldn't. It made such a simple plot hard to understand. And to me, that is a failure in artistry. So that being said, I gave Women Talking 2.5 stars. The final film that I will be reviewing on The Luckiest Peach is Christopher Borgle's Sick of Myself. I am going to preface this review by saying this is my favorite film of the festival. It has themes of body horror, so if you know anything about me, pretty much was set up for me to like it, but I genuinely loved it. The film does not currently have a North American distributor. So far, it has only had its world premiere at Cannes in 2022, and it released in Norway in September of this year. To my knowledge, it will be released in early 2023, and it has a runtime of 97 minutes. Increasingly overshadowed by her boyfriend's recent rise to fame as a contemporary artist creating sculptures from stolen furniture, Sinya hatches a vicious plan to reclaim her rightfully deserved attention within the milieu of Oslo's cultural elite. The kind of like main talking point of this film is like how far would you go for attention? The film is set up by showing us like her relationship with her boyfriend and how they're basically fighting each other for attention the entire. It's a very unhappy relationship, but I think like that fight for importance keeps them together. They're both very much narcissistic, and Sinya goes so far as to illegally purchase a Russian prescription drug. In the film, it's a fictitious drug, is known to cause bacterial infections that disfigures your skin, and she very much abuses this in order to get attention for it, and it only gets crazier from there. There's very little information publicly out about the film at the moment because it's under such a limited release. So fucking good. It is perfectly executed. The black comedy accompanied by like a counterculture commentary is just, it's so well done. Like we're getting such good black comedies about those types of situations from specifically Scandinavia. Like we're getting so many of those types of films this year that are just nailing it right on the head. Like between this and Triangle of Sadness, like, it's so fucking good. It's so fucking good. You know, it uses black comedy to criticize and satirize narcissism that a lot of millennials and Gen Z are suffering from at the hands of social media, you know, and how far some people will go to get their 15 minutes of fame, you know, going so far as to just act on impulse just because even destroying your body and nearly dying is enough for you to withhold that fame. Like to go so far as to completely destroy yourself just because it might mean that you get like a photo shoot for the cover of a magazine or something. You might get an article written about you. Sinya's impulses are so ridiculous and repulsive and disgusting at the same time that they actually make it so understandable. Like they are absolutely ridiculous and illogical, but because of the way that they're portrayed, it draws that parallel to some of the ridiculous and illogical things that people have done, you know, in the real world just to get attention and get some fame. I think this film has introduced me to a genre of Scandinavian film that I probably need to do a little more digging on, because in my research of this film and after seeing Triangle of Sadness, I learned that this kind of black comedy is becoming more prevalent in Scandinavian film. And I'm loving it. I'm absolutely loving it. But also for it to combine that kind of dark comedy satire with body horror, it's music to my ears, you know. It is sex. It's better than sex to me. This film was that fucking good. It it was so incredible. Like I fell in love with this film almost as aggressively as I fell in love with Titan last year. Like that's how hard this film hit me. That's how good it is. Like I don't even relate to this film in the way that I do Titan. This film was just so fucking good, and it was everything that I like in movies. You know, it was my favorite kind of thing. You know, I usually don't give a shit too much about these kind of black comedy satires because they can be done in a cheesy way. You know, Cronenberg obviously was kind of like the father of body horror, but the body horror that we're seeing today in the 2020s is different. And not because like we have more at our disposal, but they're just done in a different way. You know, like the way that they're done in a way that make it appear like these are just things that are naturally occurring to your body. You know, like Sick of Myself uses body horror through a bacterial infection, you know, something very, very real. And Julia Ducournau, while she does do her body horror in a very, very like obscure way that makes no sense and definitely isn't a thing that could happen to you, it still appears very natural. You know, when you're watching Titan and Alexia's body is changing and ripping, it seems like a very, very natural, like, allegory, or I guess comparison to the way that people's bodies can change and like tear apart. Like, it just seems so real. And same with her short film Junior, the way that it portrays your body changing through puberty, even though it's disgusting and obviously we don't secrete slime and, you know, shed our skin like snakes. When you see it, you're still just like, that's actually, yeah, that's a very, very accurate visual representation of puberty. I'm really loving this kind of body horror, of this like natural kind of body changing biological aspect to it. It's a change from what we're used to seeing in body horror of, you know, Cronenberg, with just heads exploding and Jeff Goldblum turning into a fly, which, you know, I'm not bashing it. I think it's incredible, but it's a new interpretation that just only pushes the boundaries of art so much more, and it's incredible, and I'm here for it, and I can't wait to do more research on it and find more movies to watch. That is all of my reviews of HCAF 2022. At least all of my reviews that you will hear on the Luckiest Peach podcast. There are two films that I will be reviewing for the Nerdcore website. I will be reviewing Will of the Wisp and Close over on the Nerdcore, so you can go check those out. Those are all the films that I saw at Houston Cinema Arts Festival. And, you know, again, I want to thank the Houston Cinema Arts Society for allowing me press accreditation again, and for being just so, so wonderful. Next week, I will have a full closing review of HCAF 22. I will try to have Raul on that one again, just like he was on the preview. And then after that, we will continue the podcast into what we are calling season 2 of the Luckiest Peach, where new format, new ideas, new topics, new discussions. You can find me everywhere at Lucky Peach, LVCKY Peach. In the description of the episode, there will be a link tree that can take you to my Twitter, my Instagram, my Letterboxd, TikTok, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor. There will also be a link to Redbubble, where all of the Luckiest Peach art designs are on there, so you can order merch if you like. As well as I will be including a link to the nerdcore.com, where you can find my reviews of Will o' the Wisp and Close, as well as Raul's reviews of the films that he saw at HCAF. So yeah, thank you guys so much for listening. Stay peachy.